Good afternoon, everyone, on a Monday from Indianapolis, Indiana, where I'm coming to you live. Unfortunately, I'm here live without my guest. And so, as is our custom, Kevin's not going to have a podcast conversation without his guest. So hopefully we can I'm going to sort of chat here with you for a minute or two, hoping that maybe she will arrive. And if not, we will hopefully figure out what we can do differently. But for now, I hope you're having a fabulous day. If you're with us live, say hello. If you've got a question for me, it looks like she is here. So hold on 1 second. All right, Sabina, welcome.
Hi, Kevin. We meet finally.
I was tap dancing a little bit as we're live. I was hoping you would get here. I'm glad I waited. So glad to have you. And so everybody that is here, now you know that we will, in fact, be having our live conversation. And so let me do a little intro, and then I'll introduce Sabina, and we'll get started. So, excuse me. So I hope that if you are here live, like I said a second ago, you will go into the chat on whatever social channel you're on and say hello. Tell us where you're located. We'd love to know that. And beyond that, though, I hope that if you have a question during this conversation, if you have an idea to share and a comment to offer, that you would share those things just as if we were sitting around a table having a conversation. Consider we are sitting around a table. It's just a virtual one. I'm so glad that you're here. And so with that, I'm going to do the cutaway for what will become the podcast. You can all see over my shoulder, if you didn't know, that this eventually will be an episode of the Remarkable Leadership podcast. If you're watching live today, in about 1 month from now. So let me do that. And so, Marissa, this is for you in 3, 2, 1. Wherever you sit as a leader, you have a boss. And sometimes communicating with them, given the power and positional difference, it can be hard. And that's why I'm excited for you about the conversation that is about to begin. Welcome to another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, where we are helping leaders grow personally and professionally to lead more effectively and make a bigger positive difference for their teams, organizations, and the world. If you are listening to this podcast in the future, you could join us live when we do these on video and with the chance for people to engage and share with us and for you to get this information sooner. So if you'd like to join us in the future live, the best way to do that is to join one of our Facebook group or our LinkedIn group. You can go to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn to do that. Take your pick, up to you. Not the only places that we share the info, but it's a good place to start. So today's episode is brought to you by my latest book, Flexible Leadership: Navigate Uncertainty and Lead with Confidence. It's time to realize that styles can get in our way and that following our strengths might not always be the best approach. In a world more complex and uncertain than ever, leaders need a new perspective, a new set of tools to create the great results their teams, organizations, and organizations need. That's what Flexible Leadership provides you. Learn more and order your copy now at remarkablepodcast.com/flexible. And with that, I'm going to introduce my guest. You already see her there. Sabina, I'm going to ask you to pronounce your last name since we didn't have a chance ahead of time. I want to make sure I get it right.
Nawaz.
Oh, that's good. That's how I had it in my head. So Sabina Nawaz is our guest today. She's a speaker. Oops, hold on a second. I lost it. There it is. She is a speaker, an executive coach who advises C-level executives and teams at Fortune 500 corporations, government agencies, nonprofits, and academic institutions around the world. She also teaches faculty at Northeastern and Drexel universities. During her 14-year tenure at Microsoft, she went from managing software development teams to leading the company's executive development and succession planning efforts for over 11,000 managers and nearly 1,000 executives, advising both Steve Ballmer and Bill Gates directly. She has written for and been featured in the Harvard Business Review, Wall Street Journal, and Forbes. And now she has a brand new book out. It's called You're the Boss: Become the Manager You Want to Be and Others Need. It's a fabulous book. And I'm so happy that she's here with us. Sabina, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Kevin. I'm looking forward to this.
All right. So let's just dive in. And, I gave a little bit of the storyline of your career, but what sort of leads you specifically to this book? And then tell us a little bit about why this book.
Well, I'll start with the personal reason why this book and what led me to this in terms of my journey. It started with being a lousy manager. Now, I didn't start out that way. Interestingly, when I was managing software teams and in my early first years of managing Microsoft's management development, people gave me feedback that I was the best boss they ever had because I cared, I coached them, I nurtured their careers. It was fantastic. And then everything changed the day I was coming back from parental leave. Putting on lipstick for the first time in 5 months, my assistant Lori calls me, going, "Where are you? Steve expects you in 30 minutes." Lori starts reading me the memo that I'm supposed to discuss with Steve Ballmer, the CEO of the company, as I hit warp speed on my way to work the first day after parental leave. And that sets the tone, Kevin, that overflowing inbox, that jam-packed calendar, an infant at home that doesn't sleep. So for me, no sleep, no peace, no patience. I'm sure you found yourself, and the listeners have found themselves in places like this, where overnight I morph from being caring and compassionate and nurturing to short and snippy. And the worst part of this, because I'm thinking, we're dealing with high-level executives. I need to micromanage. I need to be on top of every detail so that I or my team don't look incompetent. Who has time to explain things, let alone repeat things? Just let's go. We'll deal with empathy later. We'll have time for it later. Of course, we don't. My fingers are always on the keyboard when someone comes to talk to me, indicating, "You're less important than me. I'm very, very busy. Spit it out, move on." And the worst part of all of this, Kevin, is I'm thinking, I'm killing it. I'm doing a really good job. Look at how efficient I am, how many boxes I can check. And then my colleague Joe comes into the office and says, "Do you know that Zach is crying in his office because of something you said?" And my whole body turns hot with shame. And that's when I realize, oh my gosh, what has happened? I've gone from best boss ever to somebody that people apparently fear and don't want to work for.
So after telling us this story, people are saying, wow, this is the person that wrote this book called You're the Boss, Become the Manager You Want to Be. But early in the book, you say something that's a little bit controversial, or some might not agree, at least not until you unpack it a little bit. So you say there are no bad bosses. Well, you just described yourself as being one. So what do you mean by no bad bosses?
Yeah. Well, there are a few controversial things in the book, including me disagreeing with President Abraham Lincoln. Maybe we'll go into that later. But the notion is that it's not a binary, first of all. You're not a good boss or a bad boss. Both of those things reside within the same person, just like they did with me. So it's not about being a bad boss. It's about having bad behaviors that are forged under pressure.
Bad boss behaviors are not the same as being a bad boss.
Yes, it does not define you. See, this is where my other point that I just brought up is that it is not power that corrupts. It is pressure that corrupts. Pressure that corrupts. Who here is not under tremendous amounts of pressure these days? And who here hasn't done something at some point when under pressure that they're not proud of?
Yeah, I think that's if we were in an actual room, it would be pretty quiet after you make that comment. And yes, I truly agree. There's a difference between the behavior and the behavior. And that's clearly what we're talking about here. And you just hinted at something. One of the things that I really like, there's so much talk about being authentic and about authenticity. And in the book, you talk about some myths, and the myth that I want us to talk about. Listen, I don't know. I'm not looking at it right now, but you're episode number 480 some of this show. And I don't know how many times we've talked about authenticity and authentic behavior. A lot. You say something that's, I think, incredibly important. And it's based around this idea of myth number 4, which is that authenticity is singular. What do you mean, and why is that a myth?
Yeah, back to something controversial. I don't believe in a singular authenticity. Kevin, I'm sure you've experienced this as well. When I'm talking to a prospective coaching client, a CEO, and the CEOs receive, say, some feedback that they're hard on other people, and they come and say, I don't want coaching to change who I am. I've got to be me. And so we have this conversation that authenticity is never meant as a singular word. Here's why. Are you truly the exact same person as CEO as you are as partner at home, as you are as parent, as you are as best friend, as you are to investors versus to your direct reports versus to the entire organization? Which of those is the true you? And the answer would be all of the above.
Right.
They're all true. Now, there might be some basic things that remain true regardless. I think that when people talk about those things, they're more about values that are underneath all of this rather than this word authenticity. I mean, think about this. This is, as Herminia Ibarra says from INSEAD, I love her chapter on authenticity in her book, where she says, if we were truly authentic to who we are, we'd still be a 5-year-old having a temper tantrum on the floor when we didn't get our way. Authenticity can also be a ruse for not actually wanting to grow and change. You have to question. Right. I'm seeing your reaction, Kevin.
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, now we're connecting it to how we frame our identity, right? If we say, well, this is the kind of leader I am, that's my identity, then it does become a ruse. So go ahead, continue.
Yeah, exactly. So just like if I call myself a good boss or a bad boss, it becomes my identity, and it's really the behaviors underneath it. It's the same with this. Which of those things that you have authentically held true are now getting in your way and need to be busted? You need to bust out of those, because it goes to another key point in my book, which is getting promoted is often the most dangerous time in your career. Most dangerous time in your career when you're getting promoted. Why? Because the very strengths that were quote unquote authentic strengths that have propelled you here are going to be viewed very differently from the next that are craning up now to look at you. They will have a less charitable view of your attention to detail and call you a micromanager, or of you being strategic and call you manipulative, or you being calm and call you lacking passion. So you've got to look at the world in a different way every time you're going up the rung.
100%. And everything that we can see as a strength can become and does become for us often a weakness. And it's that whole point of, well, this is, once I've framed myself as this is who I am, that causes, that's wonderful until it's not, right?
Exactly.
And that's sort of one of the big things. I was struck as I was reading your book. We're talking with Sabina Nawaz, the author of the new book, You're the Boss. I was struck, Sabina, as I was reading it, about how many things connected with my new book, Flexible Leadership, even though really going in doing different things in many ways.
Yes.
There are some great connections. And so you hinted at one of the big ideas in the book, and that is that pressure corrupts more than power. But you do spend some time in the book talking about power and the power gap. If we're the boss, if we're the, what I call capital L leader with the job title, then there is a positional power dynamic, right? So what would you say about power gaps? Before I want to get to some stuff about pressure, but what would you say to folks listening about power gaps, whether they're listening for themselves or whether they're thinking about developing leadership organizations?
Yeah. So there's a natural gap as you get promoted into positions of greater authority. And some of that is healthy, of course, because don't delude yourself. You're no longer one of the guys. You're no longer somebody's just their friend. You have different perks in your office. That alone separates you from others. But power gaps, the idea being, when it's not useful, is that the higher we go, the less we end up knowing. the less we end up knowing about the effect our behavior is having, the impact our behavior is having on other people, just like me, where I thought I was doing a great job and I was being really efficient. And actually, the reality was completely different. Power is like a distorted volume knob. Everything that we say from up to down becomes louder, becomes harsher, and people perceive it is directly targeting them. When we toss off a casual, hey, can we talk on Monday? That ruins somebody's weekend.
Yeah, it certainly does. Oh my word. What are they going to talk to me about on Monday?
Right? Do I need to go into the office on Sunday and clear out the things I really like in there, because I'm going to be escorted out on Monday for sure. That recognizing the impact of that downward. And by the way, here's the other thing. You cannot believe fully everything that's coming up, because that volume knob gets distorted in the opposite direction, but everything that's being set up is muted. It's way milder than what the person is experiencing. So when someone says, yes, boss, everything is fine, what they truly mean is, I've started a secret group chat about your management style. So you've got to be mindful of this gap that gets created when authority walks in the room.
And we're blind to it often, because we look in the mirror every morning and we see the same person we saw the day before. But the minute that we have a job title attached to us, yes, we're seen differently by folks.
Yes.
And when that job title changes, we get seen more differently again.
Exactly, Kevin. We haven't changed, but our position has changed.
Yep. And the expectations of us have changed, and we could.
Yes.
There's a whole conversation there too. So you talk in the book. There's so many things we could talk about. I want to go right to the pressure piece, because I think you already said it, and I think that that might be the truly unique sort of approach that you've taken in the book that maybe sets this book apart from others. Not that you're the first to acknowledge that we feel pressure, right? But you've talked about it in terms of how it falls out in terms of pitfalls, and you say that there are 3 big areas of those pitfalls, and I'm going to have us dive into each of them, but just tell everybody what the pitfalls are first at a high level, and then we'll dive into them a little bit.
Are you talking about the specific pressure pitfalls themselves?
Yes, pressure
Kevin?
Pitfalls. Controlling, okay, abdicating,
yes,
automating. Yes. I just did that. So let's just talk about each one. Let's just go into, so give us an overview of that. So what you're saying is we do one or more of these things when we feel under pressure. You already talked about your pressure situation. So when you talk about those pitfalls, say a little bit more about them, and then we'll dive into it.
Yeah, there's several different pitfalls. The one of the there are a couple that come up over and over again. One is the pitfall of our own unmet hungers. And what I mean by that is our inner desires, our very human inner desires, to be loved, to be universally beloved, to be seen as the smartest person in the room, to never age out, to or be relevant, to build dependency on ourselves, to be seen as a hero or a martyr or a victim. These are not necessarily noble desires. They're self-serving, but they come packaged in our psychology as human beings. And just like when you go to the grocery store hungry and you buy junk food, if you go to work hungry, you indulge in junk behaviors. It's the pressures you're putting on yourself because of these hungers, these unmet hungers, to do that. A client I coach has an insatiable need to be adored by everybody. And they told me, this is it. I'm going to go read them the riot act about the budget. It's got to be cut. They're dragging their heels. And after, in the next session, I said, so how did that go? Oh, we didn't really get to that, because we started talking about this amazing presentation I did with these clients. And of course, the team knows how to play you. They started flattering this person, and off they went from their main track. So recognizing what are the unmet hungers that can sidetrack you, that can take you off on junkie paths. And another really common one is being a sole provider, sole, SOLE, as in I'm the only one who. It's the I've got this mantra. And I could, again, do this for the best of intentions. And some of it is great in moderation, as you said, Kevin. So, a sole provider as a caretaker, my team is under a lot of pressure. I'm going to just jump in and help them out. Or I can get this done faster than I can explain it to somebody. Or I can do this better. Or
no one's ever said those things ever. And here's the other thing, going back to this whole getting promoted thing. One of the things, those things that you just described, being able to do something better, being able to do something faster, being able to, to get a lot accomplished, are often how we got promoted and how we view ourselves. And so why would we want to let go of that stuff, right? So we end up being in this controlling mode as a way to try to deal with the pressure, right?
Yes. And again, because the more we know, the more we grow, the less we know. Nobody's telling you that. So you think you're doing great. You're doing a great job. Look, I just jumped in with my cape flying and I rescued the team. But then you basically put yourself as a perpetual motion machine. You're constantly having to rescue, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Nobody can do it better because you've never given them a chance to learn and grow.
How could they possibly do it? Because you keep doing it for them.
Exactly.
So I think everyone sort of sees that sort of controlling stuff and how those hungers can feed into that.
Right.
One of the things you talk about some as well is this idea that often we do the opposite of controlling. We abdicate. So when you talk about abdicating, what does that look like for us as leaders? And for those of you as you are listening, don't just listen and say, oh yeah, I know someone who did that. I want you to be holding up the mirror as Sabina says this, because we all have done it. Some of us maybe way more than others. But rather than saying, oh man, I know who needs to listen to this conversation, make sure you're listening yourself. So when you talk about abdicating here, what do you mean?
I will answer that question, but I cannot help but comment on what you just said, Kevin. I have now had 3 people tell me that they have anonymously dropped off a copy of the book to their boss. But these are people who are managers as well. And I said, have you read the book fully yourself? So yes, absolutely.
As authors, we are happy for people to buy multiple books. But I don't think either of us are happy if you aren't
taking action yourself.
Listening to the message for yourself.
Right. And there are 4 questions that you can ask yourself to give yourself a quick diagnostic. We can get to that as to whether you need to look in the mirror yourself. Abdicating. The antidote to sole provider is to delegate. However, almost 100% of my clients make a cardinal mistake when delegating. And so it doesn't work. And then they go, see, I delegated, Sabina, but it didn't work. And I'm like, yeah, not because of them. That's a you problem, not a them problem.
Yeah, you didn't really delegate.
Yes. So, or you didn't delegate right. The number one mistake people make with delegation is treating it like an on-off switch. That is, they abdicate all responsibility until the Friday night before the deadline, when the hapless person brings over whatever their best guess is of what you wanted. And then you go, that's not what it is. And then you swoop in. And there goes your weekend, there goes their blood pressure, etc. So that delegation, quote unquote, of here, you take it, Kevin. I know you're great. You're going to do a fantastic job. Delegating meaning I don't have to do anything with it. That is completely wrong. What you
I call it dumping. I'm just going to go dump it on them, right?
Exactly.
I mean, we're saying the same thing.
Exactly.
I actually love your word abdicating here, because we're abdicating it. But we're allowing ourselves the chance. Well, we can't let the whole thing fail. So we can go back and put our cape on when we have to, right?
Exactly. And that just causes more harm than not. You're better off being the sole provider in those cases. Instead, you got to treat delegation like a dial. So you do it notch by notch based on the capabilities, the knowledge, the skills of the person who you're delegating to. And in all cases, you want to have checkpoints if the task is important enough. So you're not surprised on a Friday night.
And so that we can be coaching them to
Exactly.
get what they're missing along the way.
Exactly.
Otherwise, you're just dumping it on them. They make that their highest priority because the boss just gave it to them. And then
Yes.
when it doesn't go well, as you said, first thing you said was, well, I tried that, but it didn't work. Well, because to your point, you didn't really do it well or correctly,
Exactly.
right? 100%.
Exactly.
So you mentioned those 4 diagnostic questions. I would be remiss as the host to not let you share those 4 questions.
Well, there's right at the end of the book, there is a set of 42 questions called 360 Yourself. That is, get a feedback for yourself, because not everybody is going to give you direct feedback. And here's a way to check which power gaps or which pressure pitfalls you might be falling into. Now, if you don't want to take the time, yes, that's it. And if you don't want to take the time to do those 42, here's a few. Number 1, does anybody bring up ideas or disagree with you? Are you the only one bringing up ideas? Secondly, are you the one who's working the hardest, as in coming up with all the agendas for the meeting, bringing in speakers, figuring out how person A should talk to person B, etc.? I'll stick with 3. The third one, yeah, but. Are you justifying your actions that you know are bad boss behaviors with a yeah, but? Yeah, but this is an especially busy time of year. When is it not? Yeah, but they're not going to be able to pay attention to X or Y. So whenever you have a yeah, but coming on, likely you are falling into one of these traps and pitfalls that you need to look in the mirror for.
I completely agree, and those are excellent questions. The yeah, but one I think will hit for most everybody, and it gets at some of those hungers that you mentioned earlier as well, right?
Exactly.
Really important, and that really does connect back to that identity piece that we talked about before, right? Well, yeah, but that's just the way I lead. You have to understand that's how that the assessment I took said these are my strengths, and so you just are going to have to figure that out. Right. And all of that is just a ruse, to use the word that you used earlier.
Yes.
For sure. So there's plenty of stuff. I mean, there's lots of great stuff in here about in the book about communication. You have a number of communication fault lines that you talk about. We've got time maybe to do, what's one piece of advice that you would give people listening to help them be a better leadership communicator, or to avoid a pitfall that many leaders fall into?
Oh, it's very clear to me, Kevin. One thing, shut up. And what I mean by that is...
No, we're pretty clear on what that means. I think everyone's pretty clear on what that means. And you don't need to modify it. You can just leave it right the way it is.
Awesome.
Right? I mean, we all need to hear that. And there are some of us as leaders who are more naturally extroverted, who may need to hear it more. And yet every leader I've ever observed and coached needs to hear it sometimes, regardless of where they are on introversion, extroversion. Want to add to that comment on that?
Yes, myself included. I've written the book on it, but because the more experience you have, the harder it is to shut up.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because we think we know.
We know, and we do know, and we are right a lot of the time. But what is that doing to the people who also want to climb up the ladder, who might have ideas where we have blind spots, who might have ways to enrich what we're saying? And do you want to leave the meeting feeling satisfied that you were the smartest person in the room? Or do you want to leave the meeting having other people believe that they were really smart and they had an opportunity to shine? If you want to continue to be overwhelmed, have a packed calendar and no sleep and no peace? Continue to be the smartest person in the room and talk all the time.
Oh, and oh, by the way, when you do all those things, that's what you'll get. But what you won't
Exactly.
get is commitment.
Yes.
You won't
Yes.
get the commitment of your team. And so you
Exactly.
wonder why you're not getting that. And you might look at how much of the time you're spending talking.
None of the commitment and all of the blame, because of course it was all your idea in the first place.
And then the time you really do want help, they're not going to answer because they say, well, the boss already figured this out. This is just they just listened to some podcast, went to some training, read some book.
Yes.
Think they ought to ask, because they're not going to buy it because you've never cultivated that. Is there anything I didn't ask, Sabina, that you really wish I would have?
What a great question. I ask that all the time. And now I'm thinking, Kevin, if there was one thing I want people to really sit with and ponder, goes back to Isaac Newton. Every action has a reaction. In your position as a boss, every action you take, every twitch of your eyebrow, every little wince because you have indigestion has a reaction. Because you're no longer just managing yourself, you're managing an organization, other people. Do you know what that reaction is? And how will you find that out?
And trust me, everybody, they're watching. They are watching and they're interpreting all of it, right? Good, bad, right or wrong. A couple of other things, Sabina, before we go. One is I'm really curious. I like to help everyone, and for me too, to learn a little bit more about our guests. And so I'm curious what you do for fun.
Well, I ran 20 miles yesterday, and you could call it a really twisted sense of fun, but I loved it. I loved being in a little cocoon, listening to a thriller on my earbuds, and just running in this gorgeous sunny day with beautiful vistas. I also love to cook and host people. I'm an extrovert. So for me, fun, even though running is a solitary piece, I love connecting with people and spending time in a variety of different ways.
So usually I've had the chance to talk to my guests for a minute or two before we start. We didn't get the chance to do that today. And I have a question. The only question I tell people I'm going to ask, and I might not ask you, except I'm looking behind you, and so I'm confident you won't have a problem with the answer. So are you ready? Here it is. I rarely ask this without telling people I'm going to, so it's okay if you have to ponder for a second.
Bring it on.
What are you reading these days?
I read, so I simultaneously read 4 or 5 books at the same time. Right now, my book club is reading Autumn by Ali Smith, and I've just started, so I don't really have a lot of comments on that. I've also reading Martyr by Akbar Kaveh, and Founders' Dilemmas, which is about startups and some of the myths that we go into as we found companies, and the problems with being overly optimistic, for example, when you set up an organization. Those are the 3 I'm reading right now.
We will have all of those in the show notes, everybody, along, of course, with Sabina's book, You're the Boss. Become the manager you want to be and others need. Sabina, where can you point people? Where do you want people to go to get the book, to connect with you? Like, where would you like to point people?
Yeah, the book, you can go anywhere books are sold. Probably the best way to connect is through my website, sabinanawaz.com. You can sign up for my Substack there, or message me if you've downloaded the tools that I'm giving away with the book, and you use them. Message me, tell me how it goes.
All right, awesome. So before we say our goodbyes, everybody who's listening, I have a question for you. It's a question I ask you every single week, and it is simply this: now what? Now that you've listened for the last 30 minutes or so, what are you going to do with what you learned? Taking in the information is good. Listening is wonderful. Taking action is when differences will begin to occur. So whether it's asking yourself those questions that you heard earlier, whether it's thinking about delegation as a dial and how might you need to change that dial, whatever it might be that you took from today, the only way this is of real value to you is if you take action on those things. And if you're saying, Kevin, I got a bunch of stuff, great. Pick one. What are you going to do today or tomorrow with what you got here? Because it's that will make a difference for you to help you become the leader you want to be and you were born to be. So, Sabina, thank you for being here. It was a pleasure to have you. I'm glad we were able to make this happen.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Your questions are $1 million worth. This is really, really important right now for people to look in the mirror and examine how they're leading at the time that we find ourselves in. So thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. Everybody, if you enjoyed this, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss next week's episode. And if you enjoyed this, make sure you tell somebody else so they can come and join us in the past, looking at the archive, but always next week, there'll be another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Thanks, everybody.